Okay, let's jump right into this. Welcome back to the Dark Mystery Vault. Today, we're opening up the files on one of the most chilling, absolutely baffling unsolved mysteries out there. In this explainer, we're heading back to Germany in 1922 to look at the Hinterkaifeck farm mystery. And listen, this isn't your standard break-in. This is a true, terrifying story where a killer secretly lived alongside their victims before they ever decided to strike.
So, let me ask you a question. Is someone watching you right now? Have you ever been just sitting alone in your house? Maybe it's late at night, the lights are low, and you suddenly get that incredibly eerie sensation that you're not actually alone. That maybe, just maybe, someone is hiding in the shadows or up in your attic, just watching you. It's a terrifying thought, right? Well, for one unfortunate family, this exact nightmare became a cold, hard reality.
And that reality happened at Hinterkaifeck. Now, this wasn't just some house in the suburbs. It was an incredibly isolated farmhouse about 43 miles outside of Munich. And the really crucial thing to understand here is just how close it was to this massive, dense, dark pine forest. I mean, it was completely cut off from the main village. It was this deeply silent, lonely place where, honestly, a scream would just be swallowed up by the trees. Nobody was coming to help.
Let's look at who lived out in this remote spot. You've got the Gruber family, 5 people in total. There's the father, Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their adult daughter Victoria, and then Victoria's 2 young kids, 7-year-old Cecilia and little 2-year-old Joseph. So we're not just talking about a group of capable adults fending for themselves, you've got highly vulnerable little kids living in total isolation, which, man, it just instantly raises the stakes on everything that's about to happen.
The very first huge red flag popped up in early March of 1922. The family's maid just abruptly packed her bags and quit. And when they asked her why, her answer was literally, "The house is haunted, I cannot stay another night." She was beyond terrified. She kept hearing these strange, muffled voices and unexplained footsteps just pacing around up in the attic. She completely believed the farmers cursed, and she bolted.
So that brings us to part 1, the creepy clues.
At first, Andreas just completely brushed off the old maid's fears. He thought she was just imagining things. But then, this crazy chronological escalation of bizarre events started happening around the property. Just days before the main event, it had snowed, and Andreas actually found footsteps leading straight out of the dense forest right to their farmhouse door. But here's the most terrifying detail. There were absolutely no return tracks. Someone walked out of the woods and never left. Then, this random newspaper from a distant city just mysteriously appeared inside the house. Next thing you know, the keys to their tool shed completely vanish. And to top it all off, those nightly footsteps the maid was so scared of? Yeah, Andreas started hearing them too, just pacing heavily right above their heads in the attic.
Obviously, Andreas is pretty alarmed by this point. He doesn't just sit around waiting, he grabs his gun and does this frantic sweep of the entire property in the dead of night. He checks the outbuildings, he sweeps the house, even climbs up into that pitch-black attic. But nothing. He found absolutely no one.
But the devastating reality was so much worse. The killer was already inside. When Andres was up there searching around, this intruder was very likely buried deep underneath the dry hay in that very attic, just perfectly hidden. Really think about the psychological horror of that for a second. Some completely unknown person is living right above you, silently watching your routines, tracking every single move your family makes, and just waiting. Which leads us to part 2, the night of the massacre.
All this incredible tension finally boiled over on the freezing night of March 31st. And in just the most heartbreaking stroke of bad timing, a brand new maid named Maria Baumgartner had just arrived at the farm that exact same day. She didn't know anything about the footsteps, the missing keys, the noises, none of it. It was literally her very first day on the job, and tragically, her last. Because just hours after she unpacked her things, the phantom hiding in the attic finally came out of the shadows.
Let's walk through how this ambush actually played out, because the killer was incredibly methodical. Somehow, they managed to lure the family members out of the main house and into the dark animal barn, one by one. And as they walked into this pitch-black shed, the killer attacked them from a slight slope using a heavy ice-breaking tool, a mattock. It was just brutal. He systematically eliminated Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and even little 7-year-old Cecilia. Then, he literally stacked their 4 bodies and carefully covered them with dry hay. But horribly, it didn't stop in the barn. The killer then walked right into the main farmhouse to finish off the remaining, most vulnerable people left. He found the brand new maid, Maria, fast asleep in her room and murdered her right in her bed. Then, he went into the bedroom of 2-year-old Joseph and took his life while he was still in his crib. And with that, The entire farm just went completely dead silent.
We are now at part 3, the ultimate horror.
Okay, so up until this point, we've been looking at frantic terror and just senseless violence. But what happens next shifts this whole story into something deeply, deeply disturbing. Brace yourself, because this tells you a lot about the psychology of this killer. 4. You'd think after committing a crime this bloody, the killer would just run off into the night, right? Get as far away as possible, but they didn't. The most mind-blowing, terrifying twist of this entire case is that the killer stayed on the farm for 4 full days after the massacre.
The madness of this is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. From the outside, over those 4 days, neighbors would pass by and see smoke gently puffing out of the farmhouse chimney. The farm animals were quiet, which meant someone was clearly out there feeding them regularly. Everything looked completely normal. But inside, the reality was that 6 hidden corpses were laying there, while a psychopath was just comfortably living among the dead, literally cooking the family's food, eating their meals, sleeping in their beds. It is absolutely stomach-turning.
And that brings us to our final section, a century-old mystery.
So how did anyone finally figure out what happened? Well, by April 4th, that facade of normalcy had basically completely worn off. The villagers started noticing this really unnatural, lingering silence hanging over the whole property. The mail was piling up, and nobody had seen any of the Grubers in town for days. So a small group of locals decided to head up to the farm to check on them. And that is when they made the horrific discovery of the bodies.
Now you're probably wondering what the police found? Well, they launched a massive investigation, but it ultimately failed completely. They brought in over 100 people for questioning. And honestly, your first thought is probably that this was a robbery gone wrong, right? But police completely ruled out robbery. Why? Because the family's money and all their valuables were sitting right there in the house, completely untouched. This wasn't about money, this was a crime of pure, unfiltered malice. They even looked at Victoria's ex-husband for a while, but he ended up being cleared. And in the end, 0 arrests were ever made.
The trail just completely went cold. After spending 4 entire days living in a literal house of horrors, this phantom killer just packed up and vanished straight back into that dark pine forest, slipping away like some kind of angel of death. They left behind a chilling legacy and a crime scene that has literally baffled detectives, historians, and true crime analysts for over 100 years now.
Which leaves us all with one incredibly haunting question. Who do you think the killer actually was? Was it some random drifter, a scorned lover, or maybe someone hiding right in plain sight in the village? I'd love to hear your theories, so definitely drop them in the comments. And hey, just remember, the next time you're home alone and you hear a strange bump in the night or a floorboard creak above your ceiling, it actually might not just be your imagination. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer here in the Dark Mystery Vault. Stay curious, stay focused, and I'll catch you in the next one.